Football clubs are full of stories. Tales of greatness and of triumph, of joy and sometimes heartbreak. But there are stories and then there are legends. Thanks to McCafe, we will talk to some of the Geelong Football Club's greatest players and hear some of their greatest stories. Welcome to Legends of Kardinia Park. Hello and welcome to Legends of Kardinia Park. Thanks to our friends at McCafe, celebrating 30 years of sideline cheers and coffee that is well and truly fit for an Aussie. A new member exclusive series this is, where we talk to some of the greats of the Geelong Footy Club, dig into their careers and hear some of their best stories about their time at the Cats. It's now my great pleasure to welcome our next Legend of Kardinia Park, Premiership Captain, 1963. Fred Wooler. Fred, great to see you.
Thank you, Cameron.
Yates to the unmarked Wooler, and another goal.
A short pass, looking for Wooler, a beautiful lead by Wooler, and it's all Geelong at the moment.
Captain Fred Wooler, who led his team so well from the half-forward line, is the beaming but tired target for all and sundry. His leadership played a vital part in the club spirit that was the secret behind the high standard of teamwork reached by the Cats.
Nice to be with you.
Great to have you with us, and it's great that it's this year that we get to have you here. The reunion, the 60-year reunion of that wonderful 1963 Premiership team. Before I get to your story and your career, can I just ask really quickly, you caught up with a few of the old guys at a bit of a get-together a few weeks back. Was it good fun? Was it like old times, catching up with everyone?
It was excellent. There's 10 of us still alive out of the senior side, and the reserves for Grade 1 to Premiership that year too. And there's 16 of those 20 still present with us. So we had a great night. The club put it on for us here. And just to relive, we talk about the same rubbish that you probably know what you do in your time. And we get back to the good times and also remembering parts of that day.
What a day it was, and we're going to talk a lot about that day because it was an incredible day. One that I grew up when I was a kid with my dad showing me the clips of it, so I'm going to spend a lot of time there, but I want to go back even earlier, back to when you first started with the Cats, 1956, against South Melbourne, am I right in saying that, at the Lake Oval, against, I believe, your hero, Ron Clegg, when you were growing up?
Yeah, not quite.
Not quite.
Ron Clegg, yeah, I had his poster in my bedroom as a 16-year-old, early days in 17. And when I played my first game, Smokey was in my bedroom before he started off, and he'd been away coaching up at Umgari or somewhere in New South Wales, and he'd made a comeback. And I thought, oh God, this is terrible, playing a champion centre half back. Anyway, he came back and he was picked at centre half forward, so I really didn't have to play him, but.
Perfect.
But I remember that day and introduced myself to Smokey after the game. And they used to have barrel of beers in the rooms and things in those days. But I remember that, Cameron, Smokey, because one of his great things, he used to do that, some of the cards, you have a card thing, you go through the cards, represent something, and that was a story he used to do on the Sunday mornings at the South Melbourne socials.
And I think you're being a little bit modest. Your first game, 4 goals as a 17-year-old.
Yeah, well, a few things fell into place. So one of the reporters said that abracadabra, must have thought I was a magician, but far from that, Cameron. Things fell in place and sneaked a couple. And
was it pretty special? I mean, you're 17 years old, you're playing a win, as you said, against one of your heroes playing for the opposition, but did it sink in straight away? You're playing in the big time? No,
not really. No, it wasn't really, because there wasn't the publicity about it all. Every footballer had another job back in those days, and it was important to play and pretty rewarding, but not like the coverage you get now with people starting their football career. But that South Melbourne game, I remember, got driven down because I couldn't drive. I wasn't licensed then. It was my future father-in-law that took me down because he worked in the coal mine with me at Bacchus Marsh. And we drove in a little Ford Prefect, fully parked in the streets around South Melbourne, and walked with your little bag. I don't know if it was a Gladstone bag or just an ordinary bag there, and walked to the ground.
And the first coach was the great Reg Hickey.
Reg Hickey was coach. They'd had their great era, Cameron, from 51, 52, and maybe 53, where they just got beaten. And Hick was, a legend, and so he was a fantastic person to play under, and he treated everybody pretty fairly too, Reg. And he 56 that was the last time they played in the finals after that era. They had all the champions in that team that won 26 games in a row. Yeah. And so Reg coached it, and then Bob took over in 1960.
I'm keen to hear some stories about Bobby Davis, a great, much loved character of Geelong. Can I ask about Reg? Was he as tough and as hard as the stories suggest?
Well, no. He liked to have a bit of fun with the players as well. He'd participate. He had one favourite trick. He'd stand under a doorway and kick his right leg up and touch the top of the door. None of the players could do it, and that's what his big thing was, to claim. But real serious, very. We all respected Reg because of what he was. He had something about him, and I was very fortunate to start my career. He didn't miss you, because in that game against I don't know who it was, Footscray I think it might have been, in '56, in the first semi-final. I got a mark about 35 metres out, and the scores were pretty close, and I misjudged me right, and I kicked in the man the mark, and we got beaten by 3 or 4 points. He said, "You cost us the grand final, young man."
Nice bit of feedback for you.
I still remember that. But anyway, I deserved it. Shouldn't have been so slack.
You obviously responded pretty well to it, because in your second season, I think you topped the club goal kicking. So as an 18-year-old, 56 goals in a season.
Yeah, that was another bit of fortune for me. I was at centre forward in the first year, and then somebody decided they'd play me up at full forward. I mean, I was only a bag of bones, really. I was only 11 stone 7 when I played my first game. I mean, that's pretty light, and 6'1", and anyway, they played me full forward, and I had a couple of real good games early in the year, and got some good goals, and again another fortunate break I had for highlights of my career, that when they picked the Victorian side, they always picked the leading goal kicker at that stage. So I was fortunate. I was in leading the goal kicker, so I got a big V. We were pretty lucky to sort of. Anyway, I played 3 interstate games in '57. So, and Kevin Murray was the same age as me. I think we were 18 or 19, and we were both in the interstate times as young kids. Yeah, so that was good.
Kicked 7 goals across those 3 games too. So I think you did pretty well in the big V as well. Was it again when you moved back to centre half forward? Was it when Bob arrived as coach in 1960?
Yeah. Bob changed. Bob was. Bob hasn't been given enough credit for what he did as a coach. He had a magnificent career, both playing and coaching. But I think one of his greatest talents was his recruiting ability. In 1960. 1958 we finished Wooden Spooners, and then the next year weren't much better, and Bob took over in '60. And when he took over, he travelled all over country Victoria. Him and Leo O'Brien was the secretary then, and went to every league and tried to get the best player out of, or 2 players out of all the leagues, Ovens and Murray, the Western, all around. And Cameron, from when he took over and when we won the Premiership in 1963, there was only 5 of us that were there in '60 when Bob took over from the old Hickey lists. And for him to put together another 15 players in those 2 and 3 years, develop them, pick out the right spots for them, the selection, helped by a master coach in getting Polly here, which we can talk about later. Polly here as well as Watsy. So 15 of those fellas were brought to the club by Bob from 60 to 62, because that was in 63.
And
so it was incredible. He would get players, he would go to a country and the parents would say, you've got to go and play with Geelong young Cameron, you've got to go and play with him, because Bob was such an impression person. He was incredible. His coaching skill, I still reckon that was his biggest skill.
And some of the, no doubt, the most famous Geelong names.
He had them all. He had them all. He's got from Wade, the Lords, Sharrock, Heinze, Brownie, Polly, Devine. We could go through it. Colin was there, Goggin was there with us then at that stage, but all those fellas that Bob got. His biggest coup was Polly, of course. You know how they got.
No,
here.
tell us.
He made his decision between St Kilda and Geelong, and this was in the end of 61. I think it was the end of 61, and it was a toss-up. And then St Kilda brought him over, flew him over for the weekend, for a long weekend, and they thought, oh, they'll leave Polly and Marlene by themselves in St Kilda, where the hotel they were staying at, and they could have a day and look around St Kilda. And Bob sniffed this out, and so he rang. He said, "Why don't you come down and have a look around Geelong while when you have a day off, and we can show you the beaches and the things and all that." Well, Polymar fell in love with Geelong by St Kilda. Give him that day off, because I know, because I was part of it when they were down having a look. Come and had a look around, and Marlene was very impressed with Geelong. She liked the area and the schools. Had a look at some of the schools while they're down that day. Went back, and St Kilda said, fellas, and then he said, "I know, I'll come to Geelong."
Wow!
And it was all because. And how's that for recruiting to fit somebody?
Bobby had sniffed it out and jumped on it.
Leo. And so that was I think that was the greatest signing of all time for Bob, the coup to sort of get him like that, and also for a player to have so much influence on a club and a team in his period of time here at Geelong.
We now have the national game. There's 9 games on TV every single weekend, so you're aware and across most players. But before Polly came, you here in Victoria playing for the Cats, did you have an awareness of this incredible talent from WA? No,
only when Bob started. He had two, or three probably. Two. He had Polly and is it Stephen Michael? Was it Stephen Michael or something? And also Barry Robram from Adelaide. Oh, yeah. So they were the three that he really had.
He picked some good ones.
No, they were players that Bob recognised as skillful and no negative about it. They play the game and excite people, and that's what Bob's coaching was a bit like play your best and be spirited, and so he had those picked up, but we really didn't have any idea until he came.
When he came, could you tell immediately?
Oh yeah, you could see his attitude. He hadn't kicked the ball. And because they had to pay I'm probably rambling on a bit here, but they had to pay a transfer fee to I don't know if it was West Perth or East Perth, one of the two where they got him. Before they cleared, you had to pay a bit of money to compensate them. So they did it. I don't know, hundreds of dollars in pounds in those days, which was a lot of money. And they got, whether it was say £700, I don't know. They got all their money back here in the practice games because the amount of publicity that Bob got through Geelong Addy and 3GL is this world beater coming, and he's going to be that something for us. And they were charging, I think it was Bob 20 cents for the practice games to come in. They got all the money back, and some of the others across the outline, out of all the people. We had 10, 15,000 people coming to a practice game. Never heard of it. Down in Geelong.
Well, I think you were telling me too, sorry to jump forward a little bit, but you played in front of crowds here of 45,000.
We played in 63. I think it was Essendon we played. We had 40,800. I can't remember. And it wasn't quite 41,000. And the next year in 64 we played Collingwood here, and we had nearly 41,000 again. And now I was probably only 2 or 3 toilet blocks here in those days. I don't know how where they all went.
What was it all standing room and just the Brownlow stand?
Just the old Brownlow stand and the past players, that little shed that's over in St Mary's.
Yeah.
That was it. That was one of the that was the fast players stand. So that was an interesting time. And we never seemed to have worried about parking though. I used to drive from Bacchus Marsh. I'd come across to training because I was an apprentice at the mine, and when I had my licence, I'd borrowed somebody's car to come across. But getting back to the crowd, people used to park all around here, but there was no stress. People just arrived and go in the game, and the 2 clubs run out from under the old Kardinia Park.
That's fantastic. You talk about some of those players that were brought in by Bob and Leo, and then obviously Polly coming over. It culminated in the 1963 Grand Final and Premiership, but just before we get to that, you were made captain start of 1963?
Yeah, I captained in the finals. John Devine got hurt, and I think Yatesy also got hurt, or something happened. And they Bob and appointed me as captain in the finals in '62. We were a bit stiff because Polly broke down in '60. He came in his first, or it might have been his third game. He broke down, hurt his knee at Carlton, and all our hopes fell flat. It was terrible. Missed the whole season, and and then the next year. In those days, the players voted on the captain. The match committee nominated a couple of players and the vote, and that wasn't.
What was that like for you? I mean, you talk about some of those names and now absolute legends of the Geelong Football Club, but to have that group of players, you didn't yet know that you were going to be premiership players later that year, but to have them appoint you as captain. What sort of honour was that?
It's pretty satisfying, to be quite honest. I mean, they could have appointed, say, John Devine, and very good friend and mate of mine, and could have had anyone, and it would have been so good. It would either be vice captain or captain. You were still sort of in the leaders of the club, and hopefully did something on the ground to make the club better. But it was good. It was quite rewarding, and something. Now you look back and you think, God, how lucky was I? To be there in the circumstances for you, the situation. People left the club a couple of years before, and I got it looked at and made vice captain, and so pretty fortunate. Yeah.
Can I take you to that year then, and the lead up? At what point in the season did you know that you were that good a team, and actually there's a premiership chance here?
Not till late in the season, not just because we had to. We played Hawthorn 3 times. The last 3 times we played Hawthorn in that '63. Before we played them in the end of the home and away, we had to win that game to get into 4. Yeah. Had to win that game to get into 4, and then we had to beat them. Then it must have been the first semi-final to get into or the second semi-final to get into that. It was that even, Cameron. It wasn't much between a few sides. Anyway, we had to beat them at the old Glenferrie Oval too the last time. That was more significant. So we did that, and then we got away on them in it must have been the second semi-final, because then we went straight in the grand final, and they'd won the preliminary and came back against for three times in last 3 matches we played Hawthorn in that '63. But as Bob said, we were going okay, and we got a couple of goals just before 3/4 time, and Bob was at his best. He was saying, "We've got them there. They're going to be tired, and just show them your skills and ability and run and all the flavours." He used like it's fair to. I can't remember all of it, but other people tell me this is what he did. Just show them how good we really are. Anyway, we kicked about 7 or 8 goals in the last quarter and stormed away. But so that was a fantastic day. Like
what about the lead up to it? I've got to get this out. Everyone thinks that as captain and one of the stars of the team at centre forward.
We want to go to the day, do we?
You'd be calm and just relax before a game. But I hear it's quite the opposite.
Oh no, I'll tell you how calm, we weren't really calm, but the day started off, just remind me of the calmness when I forget. We started off the day with the club doctor who suggested we have sausages and eggs instead of steak and eggs here. And then we climbed onto the bus and went down, and some of us played blind poker. You bet for, 20 shillings or £1 on blind poker, so we did that all the way. We got to Werribee, out the bus, and we had to walk along the highway for nearly a kilometre, I suppose.
Just to stretch the legs.
It's only a one lane. So one way that way to Geelong and one way that way to Melbourne. So, and we were on the verge. That's like 18 players going to a grand final, drinking this sausagen out of a cup to make us stronger and fitter when we got there. So then we get into the rooms, and here's we've got a fellow playing a piano accordion, and to relax our nerves.
Inside Geelong's dressing room, they seem to care little for predictions of a Hawthorn victory. Alistair Lord, last year's Brownlow medal winner, back from injury, received special attention. Ron Barassi chats with Stewart, also of the Lord clan. If good wishes mean anything, Geelong must be conceded a great chance. But wishing doesn't always make it so.
And then we had Happy Hammond, who was a children's program presenter. Happy, and he was mad Geelong. Anyway, he had one of his mates dressed as a black cat, and he brought him along into the rooms. But we said, well, come on, Happy, you might as well come out in the ground with us. And they were trying to stop him. Anyway, I said, when I go, you just jump in behind me and start running. So anyway, Happy was there. We had the piano accordion going, and Bob was full of smoke, and we're ready to go for the big game. And then they played God Save the Queen. It wasn't too good out there. Wasn't too good in the room beforehand either.
Am I right in saying that you may have had a little spew through nerves? I was trying to think of a different way to put that. There's no other way of putting it.
No, a nervous attack is probably a good way of saying it. But no, that happened most of my career, to be honest.
Yeah, I was.
But no, I think
every game.
Yeah, fear of failure. Oh, early days was more about wearing. If I'd kicked a few goals, I'd wear the same clothes. So that was another, but I that went out after a period of time when I had a couple of bad days. So that I lost wearing the same blue shirt and the same socks and the same underpants. But anyway,
but you got that nervous before a game?
Yeah, everywhere. I used to get nervous. Well, ever since then, in my business life, if I had to present to a board or an event, I'd be nervous about whether I'd make a good job of my presentation, and I'd feel sick at home. Yeah. It just gets you, just fear of failure, I think.
See, a lot of people would find that fascinating leading into a game as somebody who'd performed so well, and ultimately you did perform so well on the day, in the best players, 3 goals, all that. Yeah. But what you actually had to overcome pre-game, those nerves, to then be able to perform.
I guess there's a few people in various teams that suffer through that, and it's just one of those things. But anyway, we got that, and we had the. At 3/4 time, we stitched it out, and then we got a bit of a run on. And
what was that like, that last quarter, when you knew you had them on toast?
No, we had a bit of a Wadey and I swapped ourselves without Bob telling us at one stage. But it was good because they were dead tired. I mean, they'd had 3 hard games, and it was just obvious, and we'd had the rest. So it was, if we hadn't have won that. The year before, though, in '62, when Polly broke down, we were on that before. We got to it was the second semi-final, and without Polly in the side, we were just about nearly level with Carlton, and Doug went for a mark, and Peter Barry was his opponent, and he put his hands behind him to hold his position. And Jack Irving, the umpire, paid a free kick. He's only about 30. He marked the ball. He's only about 35, and he kicked 7 to Len, and he paid a free kick against him, and we got beaten by a few points, and that's without Polly.
Yeah.
And so then the next year when Polly started, we looked, although we didn't look too well early in the year, but we finished up pretty well in '62 considering.
That Carlton side would have been John Nichols?
Yeah, he was. I think he was it. Yeah, and I think Serge Silvani was in the side, but you know, and then in '64, we got Dennis Marshall, who was another one of Bob's. These are the champions that you get from other states, and Dennis had a really good measuring stick. Look, he was best and fairest over there, and a beautiful player. And so he recruited him. So we're going well. We've only lost Ricey out of the side, who'd gone to South Australia to coach or somewhere. And we got Dennis in and somebody else, and we think, oh, this is a fair chance. And in the preliminary final, we kicked something like 5 goals 18 or 5 goals 16, got beaten by a few points, and never got to the grand final. And some say we were probably better equipped that year for the grand final.
Yeah. When you look at, and again, these names are all just in my head. It's what I grew up with. My dad telling me the stories.
The W's.
You tell me about the spine where it was. So it was West, Walker, yourself, Wooler, and Wade, all through the middle. Tell me about the W's down the spine. That's right. Is Polly the best out of all of them?
Polly's the best.
Is the best ever?
No, there's another one. There's a one equal, I think. Polly was pretty influential when he came to Geelong. He set a standard. I think he set a standard in '63 with his attitude to training for the rest of us, the way he wanted to improve. He'd come to training a half an hour. We only trained twice a week. Tuesday nights we'd train for an hour and a quarter, hour and a half. That was a hard night. And then Thursday night was a sort of a just freshen up. It was about 3/4 an hour, just fast work, run around, kick the ball one night. Just go. And now I've forgotten what Polly was saying about Polly.
He'd get there early.
He'd get there early.
Always working on his game.
He'd get there and practice his shooting for goal. And you look at today's football, and you say, why don't they spend more time perfecting the kicks? He would spend half an hour every night just kicking, not taking marks against packs, just kicking goals. And the other thing he did, and he was the best exponent of handball that I've ever seen, in the way he could do it with his twist his body and also the length, how far he could punch the ball to people. We did a lot together, Paul and I. We used to go out and sometimes we'd go to the trots or the dogs and I'd go and pick him up or he'd go and sell a car and he'd want me to go with him to the company. And you go up there and in his drive at Belmont, he'd have his car parked, the window down the driver's side. He'd have his eldest son, Brett, in the car, and he'd be over at a rose bush about 10 metres away, and he would just go plop with the ball, and Brett would get it out of the car and throw it back. When he was sitting in, you'd sit there and be having a talk, and he'd be twisting a ball in his hand in the lounge room. Just twisting the ball, talking to you, like a conversation we're having here today, just twisting away, talking. He just loved footy, and if there'd been another Polly 2 had played football in the last 10, 15 or 20 years when it become so professional, he would have absolutely loved it. You know, he was only 6'3", and he had one leg shorter than the other. He had about, I think it's about 15 mil, I think it was, and a bit over half, you're not quite 3/4 in the old time. And he had this built-up thing on his footy boot, his shoes. He had a bit of a limp, as he walked, like a little shifty limp and walk along. But he overcome all those difficulties. But his greatest skill was his ability to be able to time his run and his jump at centre bounces and throw-ins. Incredible ability. He would get up just fraction before, so you were the opponent and you were ready to go, and he'd just get up the top of the opponent on the side, and that person lift him up. And he used both hands. He could go either way, left or right, and sometimes he'd roll it down. He's that much higher than the other bloke because he jumped early. He'd roll the ball down down to his left hand and grab it and whack it out to somebody running down the wing or half forward. He had it was like a cat ability, but he had this skill, and the only reason that is because I reckon he practiced so much, and it was a good lesson for all of us to try and improve your skills. But he made an awful, magnificent contribution to Geelong Footy Club and football in general in Victoria, because the handball wasn't as an offensive weapon for a lot of clubs. And when Polly came, because it was always, he never went sideways, he always went forward to somebody running with his handball. And you know, in I can't remember what year it was. It was just before, it must have been about 64. Some of the clubs went to the VFL objecting to his style of rugby because he had an unfair advantage. They did. They complained. They were trying to change the rules, the umpiring rules, to stop Polly's influence in the game. That's how much he impressed the whole thing. So we're talking about somebody, quite unique. And the other one, of course, is Gary Ablett Senior. I had a bit of time because I was on the board when Gary came here and Blighty came, and Malcolm Blight turned Gary Ablett into he's a sensational skilled player. I think he had more skills than Polly in a lot of ways. Polly had that mental capacity to be able to overcome and want to be better. Gary Senior had enormous natural skills, enormous, like it just incredible. And we'd come to when Pat and I, my wife and I was on the board, we'd sit in the old social club here, and you just rise out of your seat every time he got near and marked the ball, and like the excitement he had when he went for it. It's hard to think of anybody else that the crowd just.
The crowd would rise even if you got near it, wouldn't he?
Cameron, it was sensational. You probably witnessed in the days when young.
I reckon I was one of those rising every time.
No, my wife doesn't say much, but football. But when he got near the ball, like it'd be like an automatic. It clap the hands and so. Those two, and I shouldn't say the best because we've had some outstanding players in the last 20 years at the club. Really, really fantastic. But as people, skills and influences, totally different characters, which meant you've got to make allowances to some and compare against others.
I have to ask you. You mentioned his name. What was Blighty like? Well, you're on the board.
No, I was on the board.
Coach.
Yeah, we Kenny Gannon was secretary, what they call general manager. They've changed the names over the years, and we said, well, Blight's available. We'll go down. He was a manager of a trucking business in Melbourne. So Kenny and I went down and interviewed him, and he got it. But I didn't know he was a bit different in some ways. He had some funny ideas, but I never went into the rooms with, when they had their training nights, because I lived in Melbourne anyways, but I would see them Saturdays. But some of the methods, you've probably got a better idea than me about.
He certainly got them playing good attacking footy though, didn't he?
Well, he
played his strengths.
He was influential in getting Gary to sort of perform more to the standards in relation to training, as well as because look, Ablett was that good. You'd pick him if he didn't train. He was that good. That's my impression. But Malcolm got him to sort of concede ground, and say, look, we've got to be part of a team. You're part of a team. Otherwise, we might be able to fit you in somewhere down the track. And he adapted to Malcolm's suggestions, and from then on. Mate, he was sensational. And without that, not the interference, but without that advice and request from Malcolm, I might be wrong, but I think he had a great interest in how he performed in later years.
Well, unfortunately, I got to experience how good his son played as well with Gary Jr.
Exactly.
It's always a good comparison when you hear the names Polly, Gary Senior, and Gary Jr. As three of the greatest ever. I have to ask you, we moved on to later years. After you finished up quite early at Geelong, but it was what a lot of players did at the time. You went over to Tassie. I think you mentioned John Devine. He did the same thing. Was that purely just at the time there was better money elsewhere other than being in the VFL?
We got, I suppose I mean to tell you, but when in '63 we got £20, which is $40 a game. £10 of that went into two provident funds, so you only got £10 cash. You had the Geelong one. You got, if you only played 30 games, you got your 30 by 5, £150. The AFL one, there's two funds run side by side. You had to play 50 games in the AFL before you qualified. So there's a lot of players don't play 50 games in league footy.
Yeah.
So that was all went back into the coppers of the VFL in those days. So we got that, and then the grand final in '63, we got £50, $100.
As a bonus.
No, that's what our pay was.
Yeah.
Not a bonus, that was the best we got. we got £20 plus another 30. Yeah. So that was your money. So you play, say, 18 games, you get 20, so you got £360, which is $700 a year. A lot of players were going away into coaching because you'd get nearly your whole 5-10 years service paid in 1 or 2 years coaching.
Wow.
And that made a difference between, for some with young families, but we all had it made a difference about whether you maybe get another car somewhere along the line down the track and a little bit of security. Like, it was hard because when I played my first game at Geelong, I was an apprentice at the mine, Mattingly Brown Coal, and my wage was £4.76, which is $8.75
a week.
$8.75. You want to get a cup of coffee and a sandwich that now. So it was relevant because even before, even in the 50s, I remember talking to the great Fred Flanagan about. I mean, he got £3 in the 1950s. That's only $6. I mean, it's hard to believe, isn't it? That people could think it was great, but we all had jobs. We all had second jobs. We all had a job. Footy was our second job. Yeah.
A lot of people, though, when they moved, would choose somewhere maybe a little warmer, maybe a little nicer. You chose Penguin in Tasmania, which is freezing cold and brutal tough there.
Yeah, no, actually, Tassie on the northwest coast, Hobart may be colder, but the northwest coast and Penguin, the only difference was that the summers didn't get quite as hot. The winters were pretty similar to Geelong. That was my calling in those days, so that wasn't bad. And
was Penguin? I could be wrong. Penguin's not the ground that had the gravel oval.
No, that's down at. I did a clinic. I went down to Queenstown, down. It's on the west coast.
They still play on gravel.
Yeah,
to this day.
They still do. I went down to do this clinic. I couldn't believe it. There's all these little gravel. The whole ground's gravel. And apparently you must have when you get tackled, you roll. You don't slide because your ribs think you roll over and you keep tumbling over. And I thought, how could people play that?
We're a bit soft up here in
Geelong.
Geelong,
It was, yeah. No, that was in Queenstown. No, Penguin was on the coast between Burnie and Ulverston. And
So some pretty good memories of that time for you as well?
Yeah, well, the one good thing about football, Cameron, is that you make long life friends. We were a bit fortunate in Geelong in that era because we only trained Monday and Tuesday nights, and then the weekends were free after your game, and because we were all equal because we all got the same money. There was a cult that was there, so there was no. I shouldn't say it, but there's no sort of they're slightly better than somebody else because they're getting more, and you get all these insinuations. But we were all felt equal, and we did a lot of things together. Like I got friends now from the 60 years for the players, and I've been to their families' weddings and their granddaughters' weddings because that's the friendship they built through football. Wherever we've been, we've had long-term friends in Tassie still, and we went to Kiab and we were up there for about 13 years after we finished coaching up there, and we've got 55-year-old friends there now. 55 years of friendship, of good friendship. Like you get friends, you get acquaintances, friends, good friends, but you've got only a handful of special friends that you have in your life. And I've been fortunate. In the areas we've been, we've got some special friends in the locations we've been to, and that's one of the most pleasing parts about the football community.
Yeah.
It is. You can work. I worked at a company for 30 years, 35 years, and probably only got one person who we don't do a lot, but we might meet once a year for a cup of coffee, but no long-lasting friendship, because football created an atmosphere to us that we enjoyed one another's company. We all did things. We'd go down to Bowen Heads. There'd be 20 players and the kids, young kids there at Callan's, having a water ski and mucking around. Like, people haven't got the time nowadays, I don't think, to do that sort of stuff.
You talk about that footy community feel, and this is where I'll finish it up, but that feel of coming back together to a club, but getting to know each other across generations. Pretty special night earlier on in the year for you and I and Tom Harley, but also for Joel Selwood, when they unfurled the flag here, and getting together as that connection from the past to through Tom's era, through my era, and now onto Joel's. It is pretty special being able to come back here and have that time together.
I'm very fortunate, and I tell you, I reckon if our dear friend Fred Flanagan, he would have been beside himself if he'd been able enough to be still here and wheeled in a wheelchair to be there, because he was a champion person. But that other night was really, really good to me. Yeah, you feel like and to be out in the grounds, all you fellas, and to be part of, even though it's many years ago. But Joel to me has been, an inspiration to a lot of Geelong people, both through football and outside football. Your era did something that was important to the past players when you invited us back to some training sessions, going back in the 07, 9s as it was, and we'd come and have lunch with you and sit around the table and have a yarn. We often talk about that, our mob, the 60s players, and we thought that was one of the most rewarding experiences we've had with the modern day footy. All you fellas were, so good to us. And you sit, and sit again, and listen to the plan for the Saturday game in your auditorium, whatever it is. You sit up and think, like we think, geez, how lucky are we? We've been invited back to, and here's a club that they've got a team of champions, and they're having dinner with us and having a yarn and a joke and Tommy Lonergan and Mackie and he bullshit, saying a few things and like great stuff. Like we still remember that, and that was important. But getting on to Joel,
can I just interrupt and say we loved it. The only thing that made me nervous was seeing John Sherrick and Steve Johnson sitting next to each other, cooking up plans together, catching up for a beer,
or having a bet on the races. But Joel, I've said this a lot in the recent times that I don't know anybody in my connection with Geelong that has made a bigger contribution on the field and off the field as him. You look at your Bob Davis and Hickey and various other significant members of the club over the years, but I think this fella has done something more outside with the community, as well as, like he's, a lot of you have played with a great amount of spirit, and you've got the best out of your abilities, and being a legend in the club, he's done that as well. He's got the best out of his ability. Wasn't probably the most skillful of, but his tenacity, his determination, like inspirational to people. But outside with the various chapters around Geelong, you just got to say this is he's a one in a special, this bloke, and I don't think I've seen anybody make as big a contribution. All of you made a lot of contribution to the club, but this fella, in my opinion, has done more than I can remember anybody else in my time. I haven't lived in Geelong, but just because of the way he's doing, and on a personal note, I got to know Joel pretty well over the last, I suppose, 10 years or so, particularly when he became captain. I'd sent him a little text on on significant milestones, and I'd get a text back within 10 seconds. Never responded, never not respond to a text. And I felt pretty privileged, that he took time to say thank you,
Yeah, he's pretty special, isn't he? I reckon he would have felt pretty special though, getting a text from you as well.
Yeah, no, it's good, good man.
I agree with you. Thank you so much for sharing your story with us. I'm looking forward to seeing all the clips as well, the highlights, particularly of that special day in 1963. But Fred,
Thank you,
thanks for sharing.
Well done, mate.